Welcome back to A Drop of Happy, where we focus on carefree, stress well, light and lively living while reviewing and discussing all things entertainment and wellness, health and wellness, stress management, all that good stuff. This is the podcast arm to the blog, liveview.com. So please visit liveview.com. And of course, you could look up A Drop of Happy on all major streaming, I think except Pandora, and I don't know why. So I have to work on that. But it's basically on everything else. Um, I'm your host. Did I say that? I'm your host, Wanda Toby. And what can you expect on the show today? Of course, we're going to do the journal prompt. I feel like it's a really good one. And it's books. Today, we're going to talk about books. We're not going to talk about books. We're going to talk about a book that I read and I did a review on. So there's a post about that. But it's going to be a series. And this one is the third installment because it's going to be a series of my favorite quotes from the book because it's just so rich, and we're going to get into it. And then part of that, I feel like it's we're going to dive in a little bit more than I usually do with dehumanization. Do y'all know what dehumanization is? Do you know what it looks like? Have you been dehumanized? All that good stuff. So let's get started with the journal prompt. So the journal prompt is actually pulled from one of the quotes from the book. And of course, the book is Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto by Tricia Hersey. And I think it is so appropriate. As a matter of fact, she has another book, a little companion, and I'm finishing Imagination and Manifesto. I've been reading it forever because I've been reading it forever. And then I don't know what I'm going to read next because my TBR list is very long. TBR is to be read, to be read, to be read. And it is so long. But I got this little, and it's so cute. It's We Will Rest, The Art of Escape by Tricia Hersey. And I cannot wait to read it. And I do think it's just if you have read or listened to the review of Rest is Resistance, you'll know what my problems are. You'll know what my issues are. But I think I think this will answer it. So I'm excited. I can't wait to read it. If you want to look it up, it's We Will Rest, The Art of the Escape by Tricia Hersey. But you need to read Rest is Resistance first if you haven't. But again, go back and listen to that. Read or listen to that episode from my review. And I've done part one, no, Tenet one, which kind of goes over those quotes. So Tenet 2 is the one we're going to go over today, and it kind of goes over those quotes as well. So the journal prompt is one of the quotes from there, and the quote is, "We are meant to survive and ultimately thrive because we are divine." And I want you to use this as your affirmation statement. So your journal prompt is to affirm yourself this time. So our journal prompts they'll either be quotes, they'll either be questions, like thought-provoking questions, or they'll just be affirmations. So this one, I want you to use it as your affirmation statement. So you would just write it over and over and over again, however many times, but also as a reflection. What does that mean to you? Do you believe it? We are meant to survive and ultimately thrive because we are divine. And we're going to get into it a little bit more. So, of course, divine has to do with divinity, spirituality, if you're religious. But if you are not a religious person or a spiritual person, you could substitute divine with human. We are meant to survive and ultimately thrive because we are human. I would say we are divine and we're human, which basically means that We are meant to thrive and survive just because we exist, just because we draw breath. And the journal prompt is to affirm that for yourself. But the reflection piece is, do you believe that? And for some of y'all, I encourage you to journal. I encourage you, you already know because we do a journal prompt for every episode. So I encourage you to journal. But if you don't, then reflect. Use that as your mantra, which is like a saying that you say over to yourself. Use that as your affirmation statement throughout the day if you're not going to write it. But then really ask yourself, do I believe that? And we'll get more, maybe at the end of this, you'll understand why we're asking that question and why we want you to reflect on that if you do not believe it. It's very important. So, again, we are talking about Rest is Resistance, which is the book by Trisha Hersey. We've done Tenet 1. She has 4 tenets, and we're going to go over the tenets. So we're always going to go over the tenets. She has 4 tenets, and we've done Tenet 1, so now it's Tenet 2. And I'm just pulling out the quotes that were impactful to me, and I feel that if we open our eyes, we'll really contribute to our stress management and our growth. But we can review the 4 tenets real quick, right? The first tenet, which we've already done, rest is a form of resistance because it disrupts and pushes back against capitalism and white supremacy. If y'all listen to the last one, it gets a little deep, it gets a little heavy. It's already been cleared. If you don't like it, then this ain't the place for you. If you don't like these topics, if you don't like these realities, then this is not for you. But please go back and listen. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it and reflect. Go back and read the book. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. So the 4 tenets, that's the first tenet. The second tenet is our bodies are a site of liberation. Third one is NAP provides a portal to imagine, invent, and heal. And the fourth one is our dream space has been stolen and we want it back. We will reclaim it via rest. So our bodies are a site of liberation. That is her second tenet in her book. And if you haven't listened to my review of the book, I do have some gripes. Like, I love the book. I love how she flows. I love how she writes, but I do have some gripes. Okay. And I do talk about the repetition of the book, but that's not really a gripe for me because I think repetition is a good thing, especially when you're trying to learn and absorb information. So that's not really a gripe so much because she just finds really pretty different ways to say the same thing. But I'm okay with it in this case. So these quotes will be a lot of similarities, but I've introduced something else when talking about the second tenet. When thinking about our bodies are a site of liberation, I think about how dehumanization, how that has become or is traditionally a prominent tool of oppression. Because what's the opposite of being liberated? It's being oppressed. Or what's the opposite of oppression? Being liberated. They're antonyms, right? If you're not liberated, you got to be oppressed. So it's like the flip side. In part, a tool of oppression is dehumanization. It's a tool that allows for violence and genocide and ruling of other living beings. So I wanted to talk about, there was this article, and I will link the article because I always do. And this article was written back in 2018 by Sherry Hamby, and it's from Psychology Today, the website. And again, I will link it so that you can read the entire article yourself and go look back on it and things like that. But I think before I go into the quotes, I think it's very important to understand, and I think it'll be more impactful for us in our healing journey, in our growth journey, in our journey to live a better life in this space, in our journey to live a stress well life in this space. So that's why, because if we're trying to break free from uh, oppressive behavior, oppressive thoughts, we gotta realize some of the traps that we fall into before we can do that. So, what the actual name of the article is, what is dehumanization anyway? What is it? Have you guys ever thought about it? Have you guys ever thought about how it plays into like our literally our daily lives, right? Um, and then so the article, it starts off with, when you see the president or other politicians use terms like animals, or even worse, infestation, because that's something used for insects, right? That is dehumanization. They are engaging in dehumanization. And people use dehumanization to justify greed, violence, and abuse. And it's used as a tool. Even like some people, like you think, politicians use it, white supremacists, ultra oppressive regimes use it. But you know, when people go to war, their conditioning, part of their conditioning is to dehumanize the enemy so they can kill the enemy. Like it's not an uncommon thing. So dehumanization, she goes on to say, dehumanization is one of 8 forms of moral disengagement described by psychologist Albert Bandura. Humans are capable of terrible crimes, and civilization has developed ways to inhibit aggression. However, we have not eliminated violence. Duh. We're going to pause, because had we eliminated violence, a lot of these issues that we're having wouldn't be an issue. And I think also, too, one of the things, and I don't know if it was this installment or the previous, but one of the things in reading Rest is Resistance is to also reframe how we think about violence, because there's physical violence, there's emotional violence, like reframe how we think about violence as well. But yeah, if we've been able to eliminate it, obviously a lot of our problems would be solved. But of course, it's used as a tool. And then, so in the article, it goes on to say, however, we have not eliminated violence, in part because of techniques for creating false excuses and justifications for immoral behavior. All moral disengagement techniques are tricks to get people to accept behaviors that they would otherwise immediately recognize as unethical and unfair. For example, assuming people are not big fans of child abuse, dehumanization, and other moral disengagement strategies are used to trick people into accepting abuse of some children. The manipulators do it to secure power or financial gain. Oh, sure. Dehumanization involves redefining the targets of prejudice and violence by making them seem less human. Of course, that is less civilized or less sentient. Pause. So obviously that happens when in the media people are referred to as thugs, people like they're not referred to as people. And the media, whew, don't get me started. I'm gonna go off on a tangent and let's focus. Let's focus. Let's get back. Unpause. Then the classic strategy for this is to use terms like animals and vermin, Referring to people as illegals is also dehumanizing. You'll see dehumanization at work in most large scale atrocities or genocide committed by government, armies, or terrorists. The main purpose is to get people to accept or even engage in behaviors that they know are wrong. Dehumanization is not limited to political issues, however. Anytime someone reduces a human being to a single characteristic, especially a negative one, they are dehumanizing. Pause. No, we're not pausing yet. Let me read this part. Alcoholic, addict, alcoholic, addict, diabetic, and schizophrenic all rob people of full complexity of their lives and reduce them to a symptom or a disorder. We're going to pause. I remember a while back, years ago, one of the things I was learning in when I was doing my master's course in rehabilitation counseling was how we refer to people with disabilities, right? Because traditionally you'd be like, oh, a disabled person. And that's it. They would be they'd be disabled, the disabled. And we'd strip them of their humanity. So we was taught that's not how you refer them. You refer to them as people with disabilities. Lead with they are human, they are people, they are not the disabled. And that's exactly what this article, and you wouldn't think that that's dehumanizing. You wouldn't think, why is that important? And language is hugely important. So you wouldn't be thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm stripping somebody of their humanity. I'm just characterizing them. I'm just saying, yeah, that person, that's the disabled person or what have you. But no, you're unconsciously stripping them of their humanity and basically, in essence, like if there's a peg or some type of like gradient, you're putting them a step lower than where they should be, simply because they have this situation. So on pause. Okay. Even many self-professed humanitarians use dehumanizing and inaccurate terms like super predator in the crime scare of the 1990s. All slurs, insults based on race, gender, sexual orientation, health status, or characteristics are also dehumanizing. Pause. I bet y'all didn't think about that. Yeah, let that just sit for a minute. Because I'm sure we've all engaged in it. And it's really just kind of to connect it to like what's going on now. So then the article goes on to talk about other moral disengagement strategies, which is victim blaming. Ooh. Victim blaming, I think we all do it on some level, especially when it's something that maybe we think is open and shut, or we don't agree with, or what have you, or we do it in the simplest terms, but some people do it as part of the cycle of violence and the cycle of abuse. Like definitely an abusive relationship, victim blaming is the go-to. Like, oh, you made me do it. It was your fault. I did it. Why'd you make me hit you? Oh. Okay, so the article, victim blaming, in parentheses, you made me do it, is a favorite strategy of many perpetrators. Like dehumanization, victim blaming works by trying to taint and diminish the target of violence instead of focusing on the predator as the actual source of the wrongdoing. Pause, because yeah, you're just like, well, if you hadn't gone there, if you hadn't worn that dress, if you hadn't gone out in the middle of the night, but that don't does that still don't make it okay, and that still does not excuse the problematic behavior. So and really moral disengagement strategies um are coupled with dehumanization. So dehumanization is a moral disengagement strategy, and these others, so they kind of work in tandem. Uh, the article goes on to say some moral disengagement techniques involve pretending that immoral acts are not really that bad. That's almost like that's almost like um when people say like gaslighting, because you're minimizing the actual, like you're using that tool to minimize how bad something really is, and trying to make me think like, oh no, I'm wrong, it's not as bad as I think it is. excuse me excuse me. Euphemistic labeling is popular with governments, such as when they refer to collateral damage instead of the slaughter of civilians, or tender age shelters for imprisoning infants. Tender age shelters, Lord, for imprisoning infants and toddlers. Moral justification tries to reframe the action as a moral good, such as the end justifies the mean, while advantageous comparison introduces a All right, I'm gonna stop because some of y'all, I don't mean to listen. Please read the article, but I don't mean to lose some people in some of this language. Uh, but please read the article. Um, Bottom line, uh, when you think of collateral damage, there was a movie, Collateral Damage, with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Vanessa Williams. It was actually pretty good. But this is so true. You think of it especially in wars, you think of like collateral damage. Um, that's people dying. It could be innocent people dying. But in order to make it not seem as bad, we say collateral damage. Another one they talk about is distortion of consequence. Distortion of consequence, which denies that actions were harmful. For example, when infants and children were taken from their parents, some officials pretended that this was not harmful as long as they were being fed. Distortion of consequence. The other one that they talk about is displacement of responsibility, such as claiming they were just following orders. Displacement or diffusion of responsibility, where people justify their actions by saying other people do it. These are all forms of moral disengagement designed to minimize personal responsibility, where people justify their actions by saying, um, wait, what happened? Personal responsibility, where people justify their actions by saying other people do it, are forms of moral disengagement designed to minimize personal responsibility. I just kind of went back. My eyes went back. For moral immoral actions. Like mob behavior is partly caused by these forces. For example, when normally law abiding people loot stores after blackouts or natural disasters. Um, so, one thing that is kind of crazy to me, she goes on to talk about the golden rule, which is the opposite of dehumanization, because the golden rule um, is supposed to trigger like empathy, right? And here's the part that's crazy to me is the golden rule is like the baseline for uh, a lot of religions, not just Christianity, but a lot of religions, right? But focusing on like on Christianity, um, a lot of white supremacist groups are allegedly built on religion, built on their belief in what God wants, but then completely disregards the golden rule and completely has no empathy. But let's go into the article. The article specifically says the opposite of dehumanization is empathy and respect, as perhaps best expressed by the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Some versions of that belief is found in virtually all world religions. The golden rule is as humanizing as it gets, by calling everyone to give others the same treatment that you would like to get yourself. The golden rules means that there should be no us them thinking, that all humans, or in some philosophies, all living beings are part of us. And I'm gonna pause because this is so true. Because when you think about spiritualism, religion, um, Christianity, all that, ultimately, what is being said is we are all part of one collective in some way, shape, or form. Because if God created us, are we not a part? Are we not His creation, her creation? Are we not a part of that, like of that ecosystem? Um, so, of course, that would be the most humanizing aspect of it, right? The article goes on to say causes of dehumanization and moral disengagement. Okay, I have the article linked, but I'm not gonna kind of read through the whole thing. Uh, and there's less. The article does say there's less research on the causes of moral disengagement versus like how to deal with dehumanization and moral disengagement. It does mention that manipulation, political or otherwise, is a cause. Uh, and it does not take much to tip people into an us versus them tribalism. The second thing that it mentions is dehumanization is a component of narcissistic and antisocial personality disorders. So it's a tool that those types of people use. And so that's kind of why it would happen. And I did mention this earlier that dehumanization is part of the cycle of violence. So if there's still violence at play, if there's violence at play, dehumanization and moral disengagement will be at play to make the violence more palatable, to make the violence like more acceptable, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Okay? Kind of crazy. So then the article kind of goes off to say, how can dehumanization be prevented or reduced? Again, please read it. Please go back and read the article because it is very good. But I'm kind of trying. We have other stuff to get to. Simple. Be more empathetic. There's some people who they say like they'll be like, "Oh, I'm gonna." This is so weird. This is one thing that's happening, and I know some of y'all parents might agree with this, but it's time. It's back to school time, so people are buying school supplies, and there are parents out there that are just like, "Why am I buying?" First of all, I get it. Why am I buying all these school supplies? That I get because we know why you're buying all these school supplies because there's no funding, and they don't give teachers anything. They don't give the schools anything. So now the teachers got to beg from us. I don't have school kids anymore, but from parents that have school age kids to buy all this stuff. But there's this thing going around like, I'm not buying for all these kids because I know they just take my stuff and make it a community thing. And I'm buying for my child, which is so freaking. So these people, maybe they're saying they're not empathetic. Maybe they don't think that they're not empathetic because they don't think that they could ever be in a position where they couldn't afford school supplies, right? But it's always until it happens to you because a fire happens or whatever happens. Guess what? Now they need school supplies or now they need this, now they need that. But they genuinely do not think that they would be in a position to where they would have that need. So they're saying, well, I can do it. So I am treating them like I would treat myself. But they don't think beyond What if I'm in that situation? It's just like people who were like, didn't care about universal health care because they work, so they can afford insurance, they can afford to pay for their insurance, but then god forbid something happens and they need that, then that empathy opens up. You got to just be empathy, you got to just follow the freaking golden rule, people, without any exclusions, without any like, well, I can do it, but what if you couldn't? That's, I think that's like the second layer of empathy. And basically, yeah, if you were more empathetic, if you just followed the golden rule for real, for real, for real, um, that would really help. It goes on to talk about other programs and things like that. But there is one thing that it says is, you can't fight dehumanization with dehumanization. And again, this is really prevalent on social media as well. So the one thing, going back to the school supplies, that is a lot of people putting social media posts out, sharing their opinions about the school supplies. Some people are just sharing their opinions about the frustration of having to buy all those school supplies. I know, I was there, because it's a lot, because what are y'all doing? And then those are adding, well, I shouldn't be there. And there's a lot of them, and I'm shocked. But also, why social media always comes up is because right now it is a huge aspect of our lives. It hugely influences our lives. It hugely takes up a lot of time. I could go. It does contribute to us not really being able to manage our stress if we don't have some level of awareness. But this one here, you can't fight dehumanization with dehumanization. Particularly, I see this on social media a lot when folks, when something bad happens and the perpetrator does something bad to somebody else. There is a difference between seeking accountability, right? And um, then kind of going over the board. So I see a lot of this, like something happens and it's a terrible behavior, it's a dehumanizing behavior, whatever. But then people's followers or people whatever want to get revenge. So they won't think about that this is still another human being. This person has family, this person has whatever. Then you start going attacking the other person with death threats, attacking their family, attacking anybody attached to the other person. Now, I'm all for accountability. I'm all for making sure that person is held accountable for what they have done. Pause. What's happening? Houston, we have a problem. I'm not editing it out. Y'all know it's one and done. I just had stuff fall all over the place. Anyway, so we're not saying that. Like, they should be held accountable, but sometimes they dehumanize because they attack the family, they are doing death threats, and something, it could be like so simple, it could just be a disagreement, a disagreement on opinions. So this part, you can't fight dehumanization with dehumanization, is on point. Going into the article, for those of you who are horrified by dehumanization that has led to children being kept in cages at borders or terrorists mowing down civil rights activists, it is important to not let the horror slip into dehumanization. For example, some elements of the Antifa movement are also using moral disengagement to justify harassing people. The Border Patrol agents who are ripping children from parents and the neo-Nazi sympathizers who are advocating for racism are human too. We can call out their behaviors without calling them monsters. Their actions might be hateful, greedy, violent, or maybe even monstrous, but they are actions that are being committed by people. Now, this one, pause. This one is hard for me to swallow, y'all. But I'm just saying, there are still human beings. But can we say they are horrible human beings? Okay. I still have difficulty with this. Because because some of this is not a turn the cheek moment. But you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. Okay, so then finally it has, and again, I'm not going to go into this because I definitely want to get to the quotes and the reason why we're even talking about this, but it goes into what can you do? 1, 2, 3, I'm not going into it, but 1, do not use dehumanizing language. 2, use questions or statements to draw out empathetic responses. 3, avoid posting unfiltered clips of people making dehumanizing claims. Again, another social media factor. 4, remember that the only true way to raise yourself up is by lifting up others. Again, the article expounds on each of these. I just don't have time for it. Be aware, and the 5, the last one is be aware of and speak up about hidden biases in your work or other settings, other communities, and all that. She ends by saying, these are just a few ideas. If you have others, please leave them in the comments. So please go back and read the article. It's a really good article. Would I say it's eye-opening if your eyes have already been opened? No, but it's a really good article. And if you have never thought about what dehumanization is, it's a good article to kind of read up on that. But tying that back to the second tenet, our bodies are a site of liberation. It ties back because in many cases, people who have been oppressed have been dehumanized in some way. Our bodies, our person, who we are. So how do we take that back, right? How do we take that back? And that's kind of what these quotes are. But I feel like it was just good to go over how we've been slowly dehumanized. And so when we're talking about capitalism, we've been slowly dehumanized. Okay, bear with me. Capitalism and social media and how everything is forming, and we've been slowly been dehumanized to be a product. Because anytime you spend online, anytime you spend on the site, anytime you spend, y'all thinking that the product is what's being sold. No, we are the product. Our data is the product. Our time is the product. Our labor is the product. We are the product. So that's how we've been dehumanized, and it's insidious and you don't even notice. So anyway, the first, my favorite quote, these are all quotes that are like, is when we finally wake up to the truth of what a machine level pace of labor has done to our physical bodies, our self-esteem, and our spirits, the unraveling begins. Y'all know I'll be reading these twice because it's worth reading so we can kind of understand. When we finally wake up to the truth of what a machine level pace of labor has done to our physical bodies, our self-esteem, and our spirits, the unraveling begins. Listen, here's the thing. Again, the top cause of death is heart-related conditions. Top 5, cardiac, stroke, I want to say Parkinson's and maybe cancer. And these are things, obviously not all of it is preventable, but these are things that are very much stress related and related to the way that we are living our lives. So currently pausing to take a beat and really understand how this comes into play. Yes, the unraveling begins because you're just like, well, what do I do about this? And it puts you in a really like weird place, because I'm in a really weird place. Because this is just, this is not how we're supposed to be living, guys. Like this is just isn't how we're supposed to be living. So it really puts it in a weird place. And again, I've talked about this before, but I had a lot of cognitive dissonance when I first read this book. And I'm still kind of struggling and battling with that. But I think we need to bring awareness, because my focus, of course, is on holistic living and stress management and stressing well, right? Um, there's no such thing as being stress free. We'd be dead. But managing that stress, and we, as a whole, we're not doing so great. We're failing, and it's not getting better. The next quote is, "We are wrapped up in a web that feels inescapable and hopeless. Will you trust me and trust your divinity enough to believe it is indeed not hopeless? Can you trust, even for a second, that we can reside in a rested future?" That is the quote, and in my initial answer was no. And I'll read it again. "We are wrapped in a web that feels inescapable and hopeless. Will you trust me and trust your divinity enough to believe it is indeed not hopeless? Can you trust, even for a second, that we can reside in a rested future?" And I'm going to be honest, my answer was no. Um, my answer is yes now, because once you realize what's going on and make a conscious effort to try to change that, that's where the spark of hope, that's where the spark of hope takes off. And then you having conversations with other people. So yes, of course, y'all know, y'all know, I have conversations with other people about this. I have conversations with other people on how can we get off this hamster wheel, because this is not what life is about, even with everything going on around us. And listen, I know people I know people are I know there are some people that are upset in how uh the 92%, and how some people are moving through this current political landscape. Um but I think it's great that we are reflecting and changing on how we engage. The truth of the matter is, we are not engaging. It's just, it's different. It looks different, and I love it, because it is centering on what we need as a community, and how we're going to go back out and interact with our allies, our partners, or whoever. Uh, and it's really an important time, because you got to heal yourself to be able to spread it out to your community. So yes, there is a spark of hope. Yes, I think we can do it, but it does take more of us to spread that awareness and understand what that means, understand what resting means, understand what taking care of ourselves means, but understand that we are within a system that really doesn't want us to, but we got to do it anyway. The next quote is, "The ongoing socialization and manipulation by the system then becomes internalized, and we become the agents of grind culture." What? There was somebody, it was a YouTube post, it was something where, because I'll be honest with you, I was all about the grind culture. Rise and grind don't stop. What? I was all about the grind culture. I do still, I just don't frame, ah, I think we got to work hard. I think we have to commit, work hard, have a plan, execute the plan. But I think it has to be within reason. I think grind culture is the opposite. Grind culture is working ourselves to death. But was I an agent of grind culture? I absolutely was. Now I'm an agent of rest culture. Now I'm an agent of take care of yourself culture. Now I'm an agent of it can be done. It doesn't have to be at a breakneck pace. We have to plan, we have to organize, we have to be mindful, and we have to remember to take care of ourselves as the top before anything else. So grind culture is in the trash. Grind don't stop. No, no. Mm-mm, mm-mm, mm-mm. The next quote is: in order for a capitalist system to thrive, our false belief in productivity and labor must remain. We have internalized its teaching and become zombie like in spirit and exhausted. In spirit and exhausted in body. Okay, we've become zombie like in spirit and exhausted in body. So we push ourselves and each other under the guise of being hyper productive and efficient. Listen, you can go on my page, on my post, and absorb these quotes. Again, I encourage you to get the book. um I really should have like an affiliate link so y'all can buy the book so I can make some coin, because I'm still in the bubble of capitalism, and sister girl still needs it, but I don't have that. uh but I do 100% encourage you to get this book, and sit with some of these things. But please, you can go and go to my page, lightv.com, uh or I think I will also put the quotes on the streaming pages, because sometimes some of this you might want to sit. And in actuality, if you want to talk about journal prompts, you can sit with each of these quotes for a journal prompt. If you want to like think on it and things like that, you can sit with each of these quotes. But I'm just going to read it again because, ooh, in order for a capitalist system to thrive, our false belief in productivity and labor must remain. We have internalized its teachings and become zombie like in spirit and exhausted in body. So we push ourselves and each other under the guise of being hyperproductive and efficient. And that's just not a thing. Hyperproductivity, again, this is why stress management is like out the window. Stress management is out the window. And again, us taking care of ourselves would help to minimize some of these causes of death. And if you just want to go away from that, would just help us lead a better quality of life with our loved ones, with our family, with our friends. Okay? It really would. So what do we need to do? We need to slow down. Slow down. We need to slow down, and we need to put things in perspective, right? And we need to not beat up on ourselves. Which leads into the next quote. We become rigid and impatient when our checklist isn't completed to perfection. We become less human and less secure. We believe we are only meant to survive and not thrive. So we engage in self dehumanization. And I know I felt this. Like there are some days I'm just like, I beat myself up. And I know a lot of my friends do, who are professionals, who are doing the thing. But we beat ourselves up. Like if we have a day where we didn't do the things that we were supposed to do, or we didn't check everything off our list, or we may have gotten like 2 things done on the list, but because we didn't get 5 things done on the list, we are beating ourselves up. And here's the thing: sometimes that list is ridiculous. Sometimes that list is too darn ambitious. Sometimes that list doesn't take into perspective everything else that we got going on. Sometimes that list doesn't take into perspective that, heifer, you need sleep. You tired. You going through the changes. Or sir, you running yourself ragged. You just worked a 14-hour shift, or whatever, or mentally you have not paused. So to complete this list that you got going on, in that, friend, um no. No. So we definitely need to take care of ourselves more, because we tend to do it less and less and less, because we put other priorities in front of our needs. We put other priorities in front of ourselves. which is detrimental to our living. We barely have time for family. We barely have time to even cook dinner, which is a thing that used to bring communities together, used to bring your family together and things like that. We don't have time to do that. Okay. Next quote. I clearly remember the moment it clicked for me how a capitalist, patriarchal, ableist, anti Black system could never make space for the success I wanted for myself. The success grind culture props up centers constant labor, material wealth, and overworking as a badge of honor. Resting is about the beginning process of undoing trauma that we can thrive and evolve back to our natural state, a state of ease and rest. That is the quote. Like, all of this, ableist, for somebody who does not know what ableist means, it's language that, the best I could say, dehumanizes people with disabilities. It doesn't take them into consideration because we are all able-bodied, and it doesn't consider those that are not able-bodied. So that's what being an ableist is. For those of you that do not know, but this goes back to how do you define success? And really, so really, uh, why I was a pusher of grind culture was what I saw success was, and the only way I saw to obtain it in this environment that we are in. Uh, that hasn't changed. Like, I'm still trying to figure out how to obtain what my definition of success is in this environment that I'm in. So that is one thing. Like, what does success look like to you? And then particularly in this environment that you're in. But resting, again, just to the last part, resting is about the beginning process of undoing trauma so that we can thrive and evolve back to our natural state, a state of ease and rest. And the problem is, I think that we don't believe we are worthy for that, which then leads into the next quote, which is the main one, which is the journal prompt, which is the affirmation statement that I want you guys to think about is: we are meant to survive and ultimately thrive because we are divine. And you could substitute divine with human. And I always say, just because we are, like, we are meant to be here, we are meant to be successful, we are meant to just and we are not in that space, or that believes that, or we've internalized the opposite of that. So again, we are meant to survive and ultimately thrive because we are divine. The next quote: our everyday behaviors and false beliefs about productivity drives us into behaving in a robotic and machine-like way. Again, this quote really just drives home the point of us being in this environment that has low-key caused us to dehumanize ourselves. And this one is very impactful, and I feel like a good way to end before we go into Tenet 3, which will be the next installment. But liberation and oppression cannot occupy the same space. And I will go back to post-Civil War, which is a really good example, because post-Civil War, there was a time where the freed slaves, the Black people that lived in this land, were making strides, were thriving, were creating opportunities, like, we're doing the darn thing. And then guess what happened? The oppressors were never really, really, really punished. The oppressors didn't like what was happening and came up with mother freaking Jim Crow. And then we are on this path where we pretend we can have liberation for all people under the backdrop of oppression, of oppressive policies, of oppressive laws, of and that we pretend like, oh, just because you did away with this, there's no trickle down effect, there's no backlash, there's no lasting ramification. So this quote, liberation and oppression cannot occupy the same space, is key. It is an example of sometimes you're attempting to be liberated, but you have oppressive thoughts. Sometimes you're attempted to be liberated, but you can't shake what you have been taught. So definitely a good way to end, to keep in mind as we go forward, as you're trying to accomplish your goals, do the things like, what am I doing? One, that dehumanization person that we've created, it has to die. Like, we have to liberate our self-image before we can move on and do anything else. So I feel like that's an awesome quote to end with. Again, I definitely recommend getting this book and reading it, but we're going to continue to highlight all my favorite quotes. So it's going to be a lot of series from the book. And then I can do Imagination and Manifesto and blah, 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 blah. Just a reminder, I am going to start a new sub podcast or whatever it's called, Shorts and Stories. So it's a drop of happy shorts and stories, because in some universe, the reading me wants to get back to reading. So it'll be what I'm reading, audiobooks. I again watch these terrible shorts dramas. They're terrible, but we're gonna talk about that. And again, it's just a distraction. It's one of the ways that I manage my stress, even though it seems like it's adding on to my plate, but it's a release for me. It's a wonderful cathartic experience for me. So, and I'm going to share that with y'all. What else is happening? If you are a moviegoer, I think we've talked about Fantastic Four is out, First Step, Superman is out, Jurassic World is out. And I'll talk about what's coming, but not a lot of great things are coming in the theater that I like. Streaming, Sandman Season 3 is streaming. I actually started to watch it. Happy Gilmore 2 is on Netflix. There's a lot of things that are streaming, a lot of music that's out. What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you reading? What's happening? If you enjoyed the show, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Remember to visit A Drop of Happy on all your major streaming platforms, lightv.com, litevi.com. And if you remember anything else, remember to live light, stress well.